to show you guys how to decode an AFFINE cipher that is commonly found in Codebusters Division B. So to solve an AFFINE cipher quickly, you should follow these 4 steps in order. Step 1 is to substitute the given values, the inverse of A and B, into the cipher equation. Something to remember over here is that you would only find the inverse of A and not the inverse of B in the equation. So if we were given the value of A as 3, and B as a value of 13, the inverse of 3 is 9. And you can find this value in the inverse table, which I will show later, and over here we keep B in the same. Step 2 is to start decoding from the beginning. So the cipher will start off with something like this, and this will be the cipher text, and then you would write the plain text on the bottom in the blank. So for example, if we were given F as the starting letter of the cipher text, and F maps to the value 5, so then you would compute that into the equation with the other given values. Step 3 is to simplify the result using mod 26, so the value stays between 0 through 25. And a tip is, instead of repeatedly adding or subtracting 26, it is easier to use larger multiples like 52 or 78 or 104. So this way you can go a lot faster instead of just using 26 over and over again. And step 4, the final result gives you the plain text letter, and you would just continue going on for each ciphertext letter to get to the end of the cipher. I know that is a lot to digest, but basically inverse, so blank to the power of -1, lets us reverse cipher and find the original plaintext. We will only use inverse for A and not B. So mod 26, modulus 26, means you're going to have to add or subtract 26 to get a certain range of values, in this case until the plaintext is greater than or equal to 0 or less than or equal to 25. And we're doing this because the range has to be between 0 through 25 for the alphabet A through Z, and this will correspond to the table of values. So the formula for affine is y equals a to the power of -1, or the inverse of a, times x minus b, then mod 26. Okay, so y over here will correspond to the plain text, and x over here will correspond to the ciphertext. So basically, when we do this whole entire equation, we will get the plaintext, and the plaintext will always be the answer of the ciphertext. So remember that our range should be this for the plaintext. So we will get a value from the equation, and then we will make sure that the values are between 0 through 25. Over here, we can just say, instead of mod 26, we can just say plus or minus 26, because that is the equivalent of modulus 26. Okay, so now let's continue on to an actual example. Over here, we have our equation written down, and the problem says that A equals 5 and B equals 22. Okay, so we can leave B as it is, but A we need to find the inverse of. So over here we have the inverse of 5 as 21, and this was the table that I was talking about before, and these two tables are in the resource sheet. So 5 is 21. Okay, so now I just inputted these values into the equation, and this over here, this equation, is what you would use to solve each and every letter throughout the entire cipher, and just change the X. So over here, the first letter is Z, and Z corresponds to 25. So we can put 25 over here. Okay, so now we would do 21 times 3, which equals 63. And now we can subtract 26, so it can fall between the range 0 to 25. And we still get 37, so subtract another 26, and we get 11. Instead of subtracting 26 twice, we could have just subtracted by a multiple of 26, which in this case would be 52, and that gets us to 11 a lot faster. So 11 on the table is L, and our first letter of plain text is L. So we should fill in wherever C is in the rest of the cipher, but in this case C is nowhere else except the first letter. Now we would just do the same process over again. It is a bit tedious to write the equation over and over again, so it would be a lot easier if we just do it on the calculator. Okay, so let's repeat this process again. Q over here is 16, so now let's substitute that value in for x. Okay, so it would be 21 times negative 6 because 16 minus 22, and we would get negative 126, so we can just add 104, and we still get negative 22, so add 26, and we get 4. And 4 is E, so we can put that value of E. Okay, so the first word looks like let. There's not a lot of options that could go in for N, so I'm gonna try out T, and that's a tip to make the cipher go a lot faster. Okay, so now let's continue on with E. E is 4, so 21 times negative 18, which is negative 378, so let's add 260, and then 104, and then another 26, and we get 12, and 12 is M. So again, I'm gonna guess over here that it could be Y, and since this is my, over here this could either be B or me or we, so I'm gonna guess that this could be B because already M is taken. There is a still option of we, so we can check that later. Okay, so now let's continue on to F, so that would mean 21 times negative 17, and then I would add 364, and we would get 7, and 7 is H over here. So another thing to make you go a lot faster is that whatever value you have as B, and in this case we have B as 22, right? So 22 is W, and whenever you have 22 minus 22 is 0, right? And if 0 times anything is 0, and the letter that maps to 0 is A. So whatever value you have for B, and it's the same value on the cipher text, you can always write as A in all the ciphers. So now let's continue on to O, which means that 21 times negative 8, and then I would add 130, and then plus 52, which would result in 14. So another thing to know is that unlike aristocrats and affine, the same letter can map to itself. So O is O. Now let's continue on to J. J is 9. So that means 21 times negative 13, and then I would add 286, and we would get 13, and 13 is N over here. So now S, and S is 18, meaning 21 times negative 4, so plus 104, and we would get 20, and 20 is U, so S would be U. So now let's continue on to D, and D is 3, so that means 21 times negative 19, so I would add 416, and that would result in 17, which means it's R over here. And at this point of the video, I would recommend pausing it right now and trying the rest of it on your own. Okay, great job on solving this cipher, and it codes to "Let my honor be without stain." So if you got the cipher, great job, and thank you for watching this video.